Pedro. I'm Pedro Tetro. I'm Dutch. I lived for a couple of years in Cork, and I was fortunate to meet Brendan and Eileen. I was very fortunate to meet them because of my history. Let me tell you a little bit about my history. I am the oldest son of Sjaak and Gerda. Sjaak is still alive. He is 90 years old, and Gerda passed away 37 years ago. I'm the oldest, so I have siblings. I have two brothers. I have a brother John and a brother Frans and a sister Marijke. My mother was unhappy in this life, and when I was 26, she decided to take her own life. That was a traumatic event, but before she came to that decision, she was really struggling, and we as a family were also struggling because she was unhappy, she was depressed. I remember her periods of a lot of crying, and that had the result that when I was 9 and my siblings were younger, we were placed with our aunts, so sisters and sister-in-law of my mother, and we stayed there for 9 months because my mother was in a mental hospital. I remember that I was taking care of a lovely aunt. However, I couldn't really deal with my emotions, and the only way to deal with that was that I was eating. And after the 9 months, I came back home as a fat pig. And then when I was 12, I remembered, and you noticed that it still hurts. I became depressed myself. I went from the primary school to the secondary school, and it felt as unsafe. So I didn't want to go to school anymore, and I was crying continuously. And so I recognized in my behavior the similar behavior as of my mother. And despite I was still young, I made a significant decision, which for a 12-year-old is an extremely tough decision. I told myself that I didn't want to follow the path of my mother of depressions, crying, etc. So I said to myself, I'm not going to follow that path. And what I did was I closed the door which opened me to feelings, etc. So I closed that door. And when I was 26 and my mother decided to stop her life, and she was allowed to come to our home and stay for the birthday of my father. And she was allowed to stay the night. My father, the following morning, found her. She had hanged herself in the bathroom. At that moment, I was 26. I was busy with my own family. I had my first child. John was 5 months, and I was busy with my PhD, a thesis, and it was so traumatic that, and I had my feelings door anyway closed. I didn't grieve at all, so I was too busy to grieve. I was too much busy with my family. So it took another few years. I was 49, I'm now 63. I was 49 when, for the first time, and with the help of a mentor coach from my company, I started to recognize and understand that I had put away a lot of the emotions which are part of um, a suicide. So when I discovered that, well, first of all, I discovered it because my coach asked me something about my mother, and I was in tears. I was really touched by his question, and I also discovered that I had really wiped out all memories about the funeral of my mother. Another thing which happened in our family was that we didn't speak anymore about my mother. And it took a long time before we started to recognize that and to change that. So when I was 49, I started to read about suicide, about emotions, and what I had really, really pushed away were the emotions sadness, anger, shame, guilt, but also fear. And I was fortunate that I met Brandon and Eileen, and that I could participate in 3 of their workshops. In one of the workshops, also my youngest brother Franz came, and we were we were very, very fortunate that um, we we opened ourselves in the safe environment, the safe and sacred environment which Brendan and Eileen create, to open ourselves for all those feelings which were pushed away and which really made our life very empty. And due to the family constellation which I did and my brother did, we opened ourselves for it to in order to grieve about this um, trauma, this drama of our family. So I am very, very thankful to Brendan as well as Eileen that I had the opportunity to meet them, to participate in their workshops, and that uh, I'm a different person. I can make contact with my feelings, and it is okay. I can't change what happened, but I start to get a different relationship with what has happened. I'm not any longer hiding myself. So I wish that Brendan and Eileen can continue this work, which is very important work, and I thank them from my heart that I had the opportunity to participate. Thank you and have a good evening.